Blacks in Technology.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology.
Welcome everybody to the 55th episode of the Blacks in Technology podcast. You know what? We actually need new theme music. I think I'm going to try to commission somebody to do a new theme song for members who are the African diaspora. Our goal is to enable our members the opportunity to surpass current standards of excellence and establish new standards of global innovation via mind sharing and collaboration efforts. As a community is about to embark on a new era as our team focuses on forming new partnerships and opportunities to assist you with your continued professional growth and development. So if you want to partner with us, send us an email to partnerships@blacksandtechnology.net. If you have general inquiries, you can send an email to info@blacksandtechnology.net. Our sponsors for this week's show is MongoDB. You can check us out at MongoDB World, June 24th and 25th at the Sheraton Times Square in New York. MongoDB is a database that makes development simple and beautiful. Learn more about it in over 80 sessions. Ask the experts, appointments, expo hall with solution providers and social events. That didn't sound right, but that's what was written here. Register with Bit50 for 50% off registration. If you'd like to be a sponsor of one of the Big Tech Talk episodes and get your company in front of our network, email us at sponsorship@blacksandtechnology.net. And we're also doing a contest for MongoDB. We are giving away a free pass to Mongo Founders Hour podcast. Well, it is the third Wednesday of every month. Submit your information to Jewel, that's JEWELL, blacksandtechnology.net. All right. We have our guest tonight. We have Alex Miller. He is the founder, the creator of the StrangeLoop conference.
Technology and query engines and high concurrency type things. And then eventually got into Clojure. And so Clojure is a functional language on the JVM, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that later. But I've been using that started using that at a startup a few years ago, and then now work for Cognitech, who actually support Clojure as a language itself, and that's actually work on the language.
Yeah, that's super. I think one of the first things I noticed about you is that, you're the first founder of a conference that we've had on the show so far. So we're excited about that.
Definitely.
So can you tell us a little bit about just what is StrangeLoop?
And I'd started trying to do talks different places and was trying to increase that. So I went to a bunch of conferences and spoke, and I attended and did things like that. And at some point I had the hubris to think, oh, this isn't that hard. And all these conferences are some other place. Wouldn't it be cool if I could do one in my hometown, which doesn't really have anything like that? And I was kind of waffling on that idea and probably would have, not gotten over the inertia to do it. But around then, I had an uncle who was one of my favorite relatives, and it was kind of inspirational in my life. He had lived with polycystic kidney disease for most of his life, and he died around that point. And he'd lived a full life and had a wonderful life and influenced many people in different ways. But when I went to his service, one of the things I kept hearing was all these people who had everybody had the story of how he had created a community, a little community, like a little bird watching community, or something around woodworking, or on feeding the homeless, or all sorts of crazy things. And in many cases they were like, oh, not only did actually he didn't found it, he actually told me I should found it, and goaded people into starting communities and things like that. And I was just so kind of blown away by meeting all these people before that I said, that's it. On the plane on the way back, I was like, that's it. I'm doing it. I came home, I told my wife, and I said, I'm going to do this year. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but what I'm going to do it. So it was all kind of downhill from there. And it was terrifying.
That's really a great story. A great to honor, someone who, you love, very dearly, and be inspired by someone even in, even in passing, that they could continue to, inspire us to do amazing things. I think the other thing about that story that touches me is that, when you look at these places in the, in the Midwest and sort of the middle areas of our nation, they tend to be a little starved of technology. I'm totally spoiled here in Silicon Valley, having access to, all these amazing people, amazing networks, amazing events all the time. But not every place has that. And so I think it's really awesome how, you just took the step to say to St. Louis. And, now that's one of my favorite conferences to attend, and it's in St. Louis every year.
To have it here in St. Louis, for one thing, I think it's healthy to bring, like, we do pull work in the East Coast, and kind of from either side of the country come here, and and in some ways that's nice, get them out of their bubble that they're in Silicon Valley or in whatever tech scene they're in, and they get to come someplace different and sort of be out of their element for a little bit, which I think is helpful. So, and it's really cheap. I could not put on the conference for anything. St. Louis.
Oh.
Being able to put on the conference would not be possible for the same cost at all anywhere, almost anywhere else in the country. So
Gotcha.
that's also something that I had, didn't really know anything about when I started, but was very fortunate.
Yeah, and just to sort of follow up on that and dig just a little bit deeper, talk a little about what StrangeLoop is, because it's not like every other tech conference. I mean, it's very different.
The beginning was really that I wanted to get people from a bunch of different areas along different dimensions mashed together on the edges. So, because just taking the sort of observation that a lot of interesting thing happens when two different areas collide. Like, that's when you get that's when evolution happens in these areas between different ecosystems. You get this place in the middle where things are mixing together, and you've got interesting new forces coming together. And so I wanted to get people who, are doing different languages. So StrangeLoop has always been a language that embraced new and different programming languages. And we were I think I was very fortunate when we started the conference that that was like something that was happening in the industry anyways. And so it meshed very well. I captured something there. I was interested in getting people who are doing back-end high-performance server work, talking to people who are doing, front-end websites or mobile or whatever. So to me, it's always, and then also many conferences where they overlap. They both have conferences, but they don't, they're distinct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, and I think the other thing, just to dig into that a little bit more and to just maybe bring a little bit more color to it. I mean, I haven't ever been to a conference that had so many creators of, these languages sort of just hanging out.
I'm getting feedback here that the audio is cutting in and out from the entire podcast. So I want to try to try to reset my internet connection just real quick. I think there's some latency issues here that's causing it to go in and out.
Okay.
All right, so we're gonna pause just for a second and let me do this real quick. I think we're back. All right, sorry for the technical difficulties there, but we are back. Had to do a little bit of resetting of my wireless router here. I think it was causing some serious latency issues. So, but we're back. Not sure where we left off, but let's try to pick this back up.
Yeah. So the last time when I was at StrangeLoop in St. Louis, I was really just surprised by how, folks like Rich Hickey were just sort of walking around networking with people, talking to people about the language, his process, and all that kind of stuff. I think another guy who was there who was really awesome was Martin Odersky, who created Scala. So you kind of had, and I mean, I could just keep going on with name after name of people who, in my mind, are just literally like mind-blowing, incredible people. But they all just kind of hang around at your conference. So, you know, how'd you get that to happen, Alex? You know, like, spill the beans.
People always ask me this, and the sad truth of it is that you just ask them. So it's surprisingly, there's no trick to it. It's really just being honestly asking somebody to come and hang out and you know, be interested in the content. So, and fortunately, you know, I think the people that are you know, or that a lot of these people who I invite as speakers, they're also interested in the content. So, you know, when people want to be involved, that makes all the difference. So,
yeah,
it's always great to have them.
So if I were to just sum the experience up, you know, in one word, I would say it was meta.
There is a lot of meta. Yeah.
Get with StrangeLoop, y'all.
That's great. I can't wait to attend this year. Sounds like a fun time. So Wavell actually introduced me to Bridget, and then Bridget introduced me to you, Alex, mainly because StrangeLoop is really leading this huge effort in trying to bring in more diversity to the StrangeLoop conference. So give us your take on it. Tell us why you feel it's important, and if you can, what other conferences can do in their efforts to increase diversity.
Sure. So I'd say when I started the conference, I didn't think about it at all. You know, I just was totally naive, didn't even know anything about what I was doing really when I started. So, you know, a couple of years in, you know, there's been a lot of talk in particular about women in tech, but also, you know, about other, you know, just general diversity and just people that are not, you know, white male, cisgender, who have a background in technology, which is me. I mean, I'm fall into that majority category, and I had every advantage to get where I am because of that. So, and you know, I was pretty oblivious to that, I'd say, for a good chunk of my career. But I feel very fortunate that there's been such a great discussion about that sort of thing for the last few years, and I feel like I've learned a tremendous amount about it and thought about it a lot, and at some point really saw it as something that you know, I don't know that I can fix the way that the industry is in terms of just being, you know, overwhelming white males or whatever. I don't know that I don't think I have the ability to change to fix that as a problem. There's a lot of aspects to it, there's a lot of pieces to it, but what I definitely have control over is what happens at the conference that I run, you know, yeah. And I think I have a responsibility to at least be doing everything I can to reflect the diversity that exists in the industry. So if, for example, you know, there are only, I don't know, maybe 20 or 25% women in tech. I don't know if that number is correct, but, you know, that's maybe a plausible number. And say that there's 5% women speakers at my conference, then I'm not even reflecting the diversity that exists in the industry, which itself is maybe not, you know, as good as it could be. So, you know, a couple of years ago, I was sort of going through each speaker in my conference and just doing some housekeeping, emailing them and putting up, you know, just doing general, you know, a lot of conference organization is just walking through a spreadsheet and doing things. So I was doing a lot of that. And my daughter, who is now 11, but was probably 8 or 9 at the time, was just sitting there watching me. And she's like, at one point she said, "Dad, why are all these guys?" And I was like,
wow.
That's a good point. So, and you know, and it's something I have been working on for a long time. But and so that makes it pretty obvious, doesn't it? That like, who is my daughter going to, I don't necessarily want my daughter to be a programmer, but I want her to believe that that's a career that's open to her. That's she knows of women that are programmers and could see that as one option, So I really, have taken it a lot seriously for the last couple of years. And I think in terms of what conference organizers can do, there's a lot of different aspects to that. So one place to start, which I have really spent the most time on probably, is increasing diversity in the program. And it's just harder there, for a bunch of reasons. It's just harder to find a diverse program, especially if you rely on open submissions. I think there are white men are more comfortable speaking because there are they don't have all these other impediments in their way, and there are all the the cultural and social issues, and so they just submit more talks. There's a bunch of reasons. I think there's been a bunch of people who have talked about this, and I'm not an expert in any of those things, but it does seem that they're disproportionately represented in most calls for presentation and things like that. And so it really takes extra effort. You have to do more work to engage a more diverse audience of speakers. And that means for me that I spend many, many hours watching talks and going through just watching Twitter and following a diverse audience on Twitter, and doing everything I can to expose myself to a very large range of speakers where I can find those harder to find, that would find that diversity, and find people in some cases who haven't been speaking but should be speaking, that have amazing things to say. And so I would really, I spend a tremendous amount of time sort of behind the scenes trying to find the right people to invite. And in some sense, it's sort of putting the thumb on the scale and saying, I'm not going to rely just on the call for presentations. I'm going to go out and find people that I think are amazing, that represent more diversity, and invite them personally to come speak at the conference. And I think that's been very successful. I think we've had a great program, and it's the increasing diversity has improved that. It's made the programs better. And then the other thing is that when you do have a call for presentations, you need to spend a lot more effort going out and sort of marketing that to other groups. And you guys have been great, talking about StrangeLoop through the Blacks in Technology Twitter and podcast, and just the fact that I can come on here and talk is all those things are great for me in terms of getting the word out. And there's a lot of groups like the Lambda Ladies and Dev Chicks and groups like that where women or other people are connecting, and just getting the name out there on those venues has been hugely helpful. And then that gets into the attendees and that's one thing we've really been trying to look at this year is if we're not getting a diverse set of attendees, why is that? And Bridget, you mentioned Bridget Hillier, who we brought on to help this year in the organization team, and she's fantastic. And she started really was the impetus pushing the Clojure Bridge group forward this year, and so that's how I got to know Bridget a little bit better. And I asked her to come on and help out us as well. And she's really done a tremendous job reaching out and finding new groups to invite and tell them that we want them to be involved. And then one of the aspects that we looked at was is cost a factor that's affecting? Are there people out there who want to come to the conference but they can't because of cost? And for these groups that we're trying to, if we're trying to focus on a more diverse population, can we go out to those groups and say, if we remove that as an obstacle, can we change the ratio of what's happening here? And so I decided to put forward 75 tickets and $15,000 this year to support a scholarship program. We'll have some information coming out soon on that. and really with an effort to just earmarking a chunk of tickets and a chunk of money to pay for travel, and like, can we, just put some real effort into putting money into this, and just say, will that change things? And so we haven't. We're just before the point where we'll find out whether it will change things. But so I'm really excited about seeing how that goes, and I hope that we'll be able to inspire other attendees and other companies to assist in that effort. And I hope that there aren't people who apply and we run out of money or run out of tickets and aren't able to help them. I don't know what the demand's going to be like yet. I would love to take care of all those tickets, and if we need more travel fund, find that funding from other companies. And Bridget and I are going to be working our butts off to try to make sure that everybody who wants to go can go. So that was a lot. What did I miss?
No, I think you covered. I think you covered everything there. But one thing that a couple of things that I want to point out, something that you were talking about earlier with your daughter, is that it's amazing how our young kids or children can point out such obvious things and be totally honest about it, and kind of wake us up to sometimes more brutally honest than they should be. But in your case, she basically pointed out the fact that everybody that you've had, or most of the people that you had as speakers and invitees were all male, and it's something that she noticed and she pointed out, and that allowed you to be able to take notice. So I think that was important.
Out of the mouths of babes, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's kind of amazing that she did that.
I think that's great that you took it to heart, though. One of the conversations we had at a conference I was at, the California Women's Conference last week, one of the things that we mentioned is that when we're looking for kind of male advocates to kind of support, ethnic and gender diversity in causes, like, look for the guys who have daughters. And I mean, clearly it does make a difference in terms of just kind of imbuing that, compassion and willingness to take an extra step to understand.
Yep, Bridget has pointed out that a startling number of the people involved in Clojure Bridge have daughters in the 8 to 12 age range.
Oh, wow.
It's probably not an accident, because that's where you just start to notice it. You start to be, all of a sudden highly aware of the messages that your kids are getting through the media, and and at school, and hearing about. Being told that, oh, it's okay that you're not good at math because you're a girl, or whatever, that kind of stuff, that's when you start to see it, is this sort of late elementary age. So.
Got you. And real quick, I want to take a question from Twitter. From the Twitter hashtag, it's a short, and they are wondering, how did you actually build interest and grow your participant base for StrangeLoop? You kind of just started the conference, and then how did you gain people to say, hey, this is a conference that we need to attend?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I first started, like I said, I really didn't know anything, and that first year was really I usually think about it as a long series of doing things that I'd never done before, which was why it was so terrifying. And one of those things was really sitting down and saying, okay, I'm going to do this conference. Like, how do I actually tell people about it? Like, there's such a narrow pool of people that would potentially have any interest in it, So how do I find those people? And I really tried everything that first year. So I did a ton of talks. So I myself, being someone that had done speaking, and I just boldly emailed people who ran user groups within a several 100-mile radius, and then drove there and did a talk and talked to the user group about the conference. And so I did a ton of those. Put a lot of miles in the car and tried to, or if I was coming in for something else, I'd try to hit a group here and there and talk to people. And that was really, it was 10, 20 people at a time, but there's a difference where that personal connection where they say, oh yeah, I remember that guy who's running that conference, and, having that face to put with the name that you maybe would run across somewhere else, I think was really important. And then I've done a ton of marketing in the early days, especially with mailing lists. I belong to several hundred Google Group mailing lists, and at least skim many of them. I don't really participate in many of them, but I do post. I post stuff in there, and in meetup groups and things like that. And so, in the early days, I did even experimented with Google ads, with LinkedIn ads, with Facebook ads, with banner ads at DZone. I think I did some barters in a few cases where I bartered tickets for ad space and things like that. Tried all sorts of stuff. I don't know that any of those made any difference at all. I think definitely the mailing list helped, and doing the talks helped. Those two, I think, was definitely an easy, obvious win. But the other stuff, I don't know if any of the ads actually helped at all. But And then maintaining a mailing list, I'd say, which is something I was too stupid to do the first year or so, but fortunately started doing by about the second year. And at this point, there's 4,000 or 5,000 people on the mailing list that I have.
Oh wow!
And so that's a great base,
Yeah, definitely.
I love the insight in that as well. I mean, one of the things I tell our working meetup organizers or just people in general who are trying to, build organizations and events is emails are currency. Like,
absolutely,
charge that with your life, and never underestimate the power of just being able to know what someone's interested in and have their email and having that welcome that says, yes, reach out to me when you're doing something. It's super powerful.
Yep. It's still the lifeblood of most marketing. So.
Yeah, I just want to kind of go back a little bit and just, say, thanks, and we definitely applaud your efforts in reaching out and trying to bring a more diverse crowd to StrangeLoop, and just being affiliated and collaborating with Blacks in Technology on that effort, and anything that we can do to support your efforts, we definitely will help you out. So just want to say thanks a lot for that.
No, well, my pleasure. Thank you for all your input, and I'm definitely open to from you or any of your listeners. I welcome ideas, so willing to try things. So
awesome. So just to sort of change the directions a little bit, we're still seeing a lot of conversation about just needing more people coding in general, and there are more visual forms of coding that are coming out via different toys and stuff like that. And, I work a lot with declarative methods of code, on the Salesforce platform. So we're seeing a lot of this stuff on the rise. And I'm wondering, what do you think about that assertion that everybody needs to learn to code? I mean, is that something you're in agreement with? Are you kind of on the fence? What do you think about that?
So I think that, it depends what you mean by code. So, I think programming involves a lot of different skills. And some of the skills it involves are things like critical thinking and the ability to analyze a problem and break it down into pieces, and the ability to and then build up solutions and steps, build a plan of action to solve a problem. And those kinds of things, like those critical thinking skills, I think I would strongly assert that everyone needs to have critical thinking skills. So, I would hope that we're teaching our kids or expanding our abilities as adults to do those kinds of things. And programmers are fortunate they get to spend every day solving problems. It's like that's a wonderful an amazing job to have as a daily thing. There are still days where I wake up and I think, I can't believe they're still paying me to do this. This is so much fun. They have no idea, and So, but I don't think that's true of everybody. Like, I don't think that everybody will enjoy that same sort of thing necessarily to the same level. And I don't think that every person needs to be able to code necessarily. But I think that being exposed to that process is kind of interesting. And you may be able to, like, sometimes it kills me when I see someone in another job and they are sort of like manually working through, some sort of some data transformation task, and they're doing it in a spreadsheet if they're lucky, or they're doing it on paper. And I see that stuff and I just think, God,
there's a better way.
There's a better way. And in your life would be more fun than solving that problem in a way that could be solved, for multiple people, or can be solved once, and then you can go do something that's more, you can solve a more interesting problem next. You can get rid of the mundanity of that, whatever that task is that you have, and solve a real problem. And so, like, in that aspect, like, I think sometimes it would be helpful for people to be able to recognize that the thing they're doing is something that could be done with code, and maybe in certain organizations, maybe that would mean talking to somebody in the IT department or something, instead of continuing to do it that way.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And then teaching programming to kids is sort of that's related, but it's kind of a different thing to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a powerful conversation, and I definitely want it to continue. And so I'll just share a little story that I had from Friday, where the receptionist I work at Salesforce, and the receptionist there, came to me and she said, just amazing woman, and she said, there's this problem I've been wanting to solve for a while, with how we manage a particular process. And she said, would you sit down with me and just and let me know if this is something that we can code, because we have this internal hackathon that we're doing, and there's a hefty prize, right? And so I said, of course I'll sit down with you and talk about this. And so we sat down, and literally she couldn't talk for 10 minutes until my mind was just exploding. And I was just like, wow, you single-handedly sat down for 2 days while you were doing your work and figured out an incredible way to solve this problem that's causing everyone across the company pain and stress. And, if only she knew how to code, she would have been able to solve it right then and there for herself. And so, we just sat down and got together and said, all right, I'm not going to code it for you, but I'm going to show you how. And she's totally about to do this. And I'm just like, this is great. And just kind of hearing her story talking about how she always wanted to go into tech and into code, but she felt like she couldn't and stuff like that. If we had more just openness and awareness around making sure that people have access and have the support if they do have interest to learn how to code, I just think we live in a different world than we're in right now.
Well, I think it's great that she was able to recognize that. I mean, I think that's the kind of level of, like, just having the awareness that there is a problem there that you could solve this way is, in some ways, the most important part of it. So
I agree.
Yes. Yeah, that's interesting, and I'm kind of wondering, how do you take a concept like that, or how do you take that mindset and kind of, because we were just talking about knowing being able to recognize, like, hey, that problem can be solved if you can if you know how to code, or it can be solved with code. So how do we kind of get people, and this might not, this might be a question that can't be answered, but how do we get people, like, especially within inner cities and underrepresented groups, and to recognize that type of thing? How do we get them to say, hey, you have everyday problems. Those problems can actually be solved with code. And
well, there's actually Ayori, I don't know if you've heard of the group called Launch Code that's in St. Louis.
No, I haven't.
But you might want to look into them. It's launchcode.us is their website. And it was started by Jim McKelvey, who is one of the co-founders of Square, who lives here in St. Louis. And he had someone that was, I've talked to him about it a little bit, and he had someone that was close to him that for I probably shouldn't go into too much details. I don't know if it's a public story or a private story, but anyways, he was inspired to try to create some opportunities for people in St. Louis City and especially in like North City and some of the areas where that are just really, they're hard areas, and there aren't obvious opportunities there for doing things like technology. And so his idea, which he's implemented and now is like off to, is well underway, was to bring people in who might not necessarily have programming background and have them go through an introductory course. I think it's in a group setting, but it's all like online courses and things like that. And then they drop them pretty quickly into a pairing situation with a day-to-day developer at major companies. So, and there's a lot of like enterprise type companies here in St. Louis, like I don't know, I don't know who they are off the top of my head, but a lot of big companies that have made spots available, and so they're basically getting so they go through this intensive pairing process for 6 months or a year or whatever, where they're sort of learning on the job. And so I think it's a really fascinating program. I know that they've sort of tweaking as they go along. They're learning a lot with it. But they've had over 100 people that they've placed in various companies and things like that. And they're doing a great job. It's a different idea, and I think they're having some success with it.
And just to add some color, Alex is talking about pair programming, which is when you take someone who's very new to programming and pair them up with someone who's very experienced, and they actually work on problems, at the same computer together, walking through the code, and kind of just collaborating as they solve these problems. And that's a great concept. And I mean, we've seen that really, what's the right word? Accelerate the development of programmers from going from someone who has very little experience to being able to literally write production level code and solve a problem, in the real world. So I think that's just a great point to bring up. And I'm just looking at this Launch Code website right now, and it looks like a really cool program that should be like, implemented everywhere.
I think they're looking at expanding it, but yeah, I mean, I think the non-obvious thing with that scenario is that the senior developer gets better too. So is that needing to sort of explain what you're doing to someone actually slows you down a little bit sometimes in ways that are good. So you're actually thinking about the problem, and then it's just that whole thing of, teaching someone really forces you to, think through it more thoroughly and to be able to explain it to somebody else. And so I think, that's a non-obvious benefit.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And that's part of the pitch that they make to these companies is that, you're bringing this other person on who eventually will be a person you can, add to your workforce, but also you're taking the person who's already there and making them better.
Love it.
Excellent. So let's talk about functional programming for a minute. Some people say we live in an object-oriented world, but some of the most complex problems are solved with functional programming. What got you into it, and what's keeping you there?
So I kind of came into it sort of sideways, after a long career. I have a computer science degree, and I did study it a little bit, but not really. I didn't really know what I was doing back then, and didn't really recognize that there were two different kinds of programming, or what they were, or whatever, and there's more than two, of course. And I did C++ and Java for 15 plus years, so I spent a long time doing object-oriented programming, and I had gotten to a point with Java where I really was having a hard time. I just found it had gotten to a point where it was very distasteful. And the reason why is because I had a hard time expressing the abstractions that I wanted to express. I felt like I was writing the same code and the same loops like over and over and over again. And there was a higher thing, the thing in my head was filter this list of people, based on some predicate. the way you do that is you write a loop and you walk through it and you collect it into another list and you do all that sort of stuff. But like I had this, there's a sort of a higher, more declarative way to say that, which was in my head, of what my intent was. But the way I had to go through it in imperative code was sort of a little bit more laborious. I had to, unroll this little template in my head to make that happen. And so functional programming, and I don't pretend to be an expert on functional programming, but the idea is really comes out of this tradition of mathematics. And depending on which functional programming language you use, it tends to be, closer or farther from that sort of base in mathematics. And I use Clojure on a daily basis, and that's a functional programming language. It tends to not be particularly close to the mathematical side of things. It's somewhat a matter of taste, I think. I mean, some people don't like that. Some people do like that. I personally feel very effective with it. So I feel like I can have an idea and write it in code and make that work. And one of the things that I've observed in having done object-oriented programming with Java and functional programming with Clojure, and I'm not sure if these necessarily hold for other pairs of languages, but for me, this is what I've seen is that in Java, when I wanted to create an abstraction, the way you do that in Java is by creating an interface. And the main way is that you take two concrete things that you have, and you create an abstraction around them that both of those things then subscribe to. And then you can use them as if they're the same thing for the methods on the interface, right? You can sort of swap one out for the other, and the code that's using it doesn't care which one is which. So that's created an abstraction where you've pulled out the relevant critical parts of it. And that works in Java. So you can do that and create abstractions. The problem is that to do that, there's two problems. One is that you have to create more code. So you create a new interface, and then you have to go back and have your existing concrete objects implement that interface. So you've added code, you've made your problem bigger but more abstract, and then you've also you had to go back and change your code. So that means that to add abstractions later, you have to go back and change the code that you already have. So those two things turned out, when you build big systems, to be a problem. Because it means that if you want to make your code base better in terms of using better abstractions, you also make it bigger. And so that contributes to your growth and makes it that much harder to understand your code base. And then the other thing is that you have to keep going back and changing your former code. So in Clojure, the thing that I like is that when I use abstraction, because of just the way the language is set up and the heart of it, abstractions tend to make my program smaller. And that means that as my program gets better, it gets smaller. And that's weird, but it's really good. It's a problem. It's a property you want big systems to have, because you want to be able to apply effort to make it both smaller and better at the same time. And then the other thing is that it tends to rely on open extension systems so that you can create abstractions later and make your former things in your system sort of subscribe to those abstractions without having to go back and change the code you already wrote. You add new code that hooks those things in together. So that makes it a little easier to extend. So those are two ways that I found that really make it better.
I have a question. So
Sure.
when you're dealing with, because I've done very little with functional programming, but when you're dealing with Clojure, do you use patterns in the same way that we use patterns with object-oriented programming?
You do, and so the term design pattern, which is sort of what you'll hear talked about a lot in the object-oriented community, has sort of gotten a bad rap as you'll see people like, oh, design patterns are basically the features that your language doesn't have, or something like that. So that's certainly a sentiment that's out there. And I don't find that that's actually true. I find that there are sort of ways you go about solving problems that are common, that you'll run into the same situation and need to solve them in a similar way in every language I've ever used. So, and those feel a lot like design patterns to me. So I don't know, maybe there's probably people who have a very specific meaning to those things that will argue with things that I just said. But in general, I would say that functional, that not even functional, I would say any language that you use, you're going to run into situations that you need to solve in a similar way. And you're probably going to have something that feels like a design pattern in that case. So, and I could certainly could talk about those things in Clojure, just like I could in Java. So,
last one I have on functional programming. Do you tend to notice that there are certain types of problems that are better solved with functional programming than object-oriented programming?
Yeah, I'd say so. And I think that Clojure is a general purpose language, and people have written anything you can think of in it at this point, just like they have in Java or Python or C or anything, right? I would say that the sweet spot for Clojure are things that are problems where you can see them as being taking some data and transforming it into other data. So that happens to describe a lot of programming. So that's Clojure is really designed around making that a happy and beautiful process. So certain things that don't quite match up to that, like simulation is one that that's kind of where objects came out of, and that's a place where functional programming, just as the mathematical form of it, doesn't quite match up as well. Clojure is the language I'm most familiar with right now. So, I mean, there are ways to sort of create entities that receive events on a queue and change. And in some ways, those feel like objects. And sometimes, like Erlang is another functional language that has these lightweight processes inside of it, and you send them events. And in many ways, they feel like sort of living objects in terms of how they're implemented. So that's one example. Sometimes some kinds of UI programming, definitely, especially with the toolkits that exist in Java and places like that, tend to be very object heavy. And I think you'll see in the StrangeLoop schedule this year that there are a lot of talks that are about making things called functional reactive programming, and a few other terms around that. And a lot of those to me are really about how can I work on user interfaces in ways that leverage ideas from functional programming. And I'd say it's an area right now where there is a tremendous amount of churn and ideas, and people are figuring it out right now. So it's one of those areas that's in the bubbler right now.
And that's a perfect segue for the next question, where we want to talk about what is the future of programming. Where are things going? Are you seeing particular trends like what you mentioned with the functional reactive programming that you'd like to speak about?
I don't know what's going to come out of that. I mean, I think that there are a ton of people trying to figure out ways to leverage those ideas in interesting ways. And I think like where we are now is actually like totally different point than we were 2 years ago. It's churning really fast. And I think that within 2 years from now, there will be some subset of techniques that people have established are good and can be used to create certain kinds of interfaces. And we'll be sort of those will start to get a little bit more concrete, I'd say. So I think that's definitely an area that will continue. Functional programming, I think, is continues to be a hot area and something that I don't think is going to go away. But I think that there are a bunch of different programming traditions that continually sort of different ones come to the fore, and the best languages steal the best things from each of them. So, Clojure is not an object-oriented language, but it steals a bunch of good ideas out of object-oriented programming and uses them to its ends. So, I'm sure that there will be other languages and other libraries that continue to do that sort of stealing in the best way, where you take the really great ideas from different languages. And that, like an example, I don't know if you've heard of the language Elixir, but it runs on the Erlang virtual machine, and it leverages some of the syntax and nice syntax things from Ruby, and then a bunch of the features that people have really liked in Clojure. So it's actually melding together really interesting things from those three languages in particular, and it's a hybrid language. And good language designers are good at finding sort of that multi-dimensional sweet spot where you can satisfy your goals from a bunch of different places. So I think that, those will continue to come out. And then another area that I think is really interesting right now is what's sort of happening in the area of, which sometimes is referred to as the Internet of Things. But it really goes to this idea that we have sensors and small devices that are coming online all around us. And, they might be, drones could possibly play into that. But also like, devices that are running your home things, and in industry, like tracking devices and things that are running equipment and all that kind of stuff. So we have a number of talks this year that are about, that are sort of in that area. I think probably you saw Yodit Stanton at Solid last week.
Yeah,
maybe?
yeah, Yodit's the bomb.
And she's going to be there talking about some of these ideas in particular.
Nice.
And then we've got a few other talks that are in that ballpark, which I'm not coming to my head right now, but I was just talking to Yoda today, so so it was in my head. I think that's going to be another sort of hot area that's just starting to come online.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree with you there. I just want to throw a quick shout out to Matsumoto, who created Ruby. He came to town sometime last year, and one of my buddies, Naaman, was, he was nice enough to invite me down to Heroku, so I was able to meet him. And one of the things he mentioned when he was talking to folks is he just said he felt like every programmer should create a language at some point in their life. Like they need to know what it's like to create a language. And when I was really young, hanging out with my brother, doing code stuff, this is back in the 90s, we were talking about creating languages. And so I think right now is just such a great opportunity for people to really, dig deep into the problems that the new emerging challenges and problems that are coming along in technology, because it's going to, if you have an idea, if you have a method that you think can solve this problem, give it a shot. Just try it out. Don't worry about not knowing, because you're going to learn in that process of exploration. And you might be the next, Jose Valim, who created Elixir, or you might, be the next Maps, or, whoever, and do something awesome. And if not, at least you'll learn some really cool stuff along the way. And maybe you'll get to hang out at StrangeLoop with Alex.
Yeah. I think what you learn is really the trade-offs that you have to make. Your language can't do everything well. So you have to choose, like, what are the things that it's really important for me for it to do well? And that sort of drives the decisions you make in the language. And that's, sometimes that means that certain people won't like your language, and that's fine. So
that's a great segue into the next question that I have. You're working is it Cognitect? Is that how you pronounce it?
That's right.
Right, and you're actually a maintainer of the Clojure language. So tell us what your day-to-day is like as a maintainer of Clojure.
Sure. I already mentioned Rich Hickey earlier, and he's the inventor of Clojure, and he's now the CTO at Cognitect. And he works on not just Clojure, but also spends a lot of time working on Datomic, which is a database that is sold by Cognitect. And so it's an overwhelming thing if your language becomes popular. So from having talked to Rich about it, and it's he was, like we were just talking about, he created a language to scratch an itch that he had, and that he thought was would be useful to other people, and he did not really think at the time that meant that he would have a mailing list with 10,000 people suggesting things to him, and a ticket system with thousands of tickets in it, and that's an overwhelming, and all asking you things about the thing that you spent several years creating as your baby. So for him it's a very personal thing. That's his language that he put a lot of thought into, and so it's really hard to sort of take someone's suggestion unemotionally. That's really difficult. So I came online last year, or I joined Cognitect last year, and spent some time doing consulting work for him, but have transitioned over to being sort of the open source maintainer for Clojure. And Rich still works on the language frequently, and I talk to him, almost every day. And but I do a lot of the ticket triage, and sort of tickets are coming in. I look at them and I try to assess, what is this really a bug? Is it not a bug? Is it a bug or an enhancement? Is it do we need a patch for this? How do we categorize it? What's the severity of it? All those sorts of things. And then sort of as patches come in on those tickets, I do a lot of code review, really, and trying to look at the patches, and we really try to make it a collaborative process. It's not like they file a ticket and then I fix it. It rarely happens that way, and that's, I don't want it to happen that way. Like what we really want is that there is a community of people who care about the language and are willing to invest time in it, and that means that someone has an idea, they submit it. I'm going to give you some feedback on the idea, and maybe they provide a patch, and I'm going to give you feedback on that patch. And sometimes I tell people, well, we're not interested in that idea, that contradicts something else, something in the language, and then sometimes it's a great idea, but it needs a ton of work, and maybe that person that suggested it isn't the right person to work on it. So it's a matter of, recruiting people to try something out, or come up with a performance test. And it's really challenging, because I didn't write the language, so I'm always spending time every day where I work on just trying to understand the language and the existing code well enough that I can assess what someone is telling me and assess whether it makes sense or not, and whether the fix they're doing is good or not. And at some point, we get stuff. We have a whole process, and at some point, it gets to a point where, and Rich is really involved in 2 points. The first point is I do some initial triage, and then he goes through a period where he says he agrees with me or doesn't agree with me that this is a good problem to work on. And that's usually a pretty quick check. And then much later on in the process, we'll have some fix for the problem. And at that point, I try to have a beautiful ticket. So my goal is to make a silver platter and make this wonderful dish on it that very concisely and accurately describes the problem, shows the problem, specifies the cause, highlights the solution, and then has a beautiful patch that's just the perfect patch to go in. And so once he gets to that point, and I try to be really respectful of his time because he's extremely busy, and so he will go through those patches, and he can go through them sometimes in minutes, when they're good.
Wow.
And because he has all the code in his head, he knows all the decisions that were made all through the last over 7 years or whatever to get to that point. And sometimes they get kicked back, and then we'll continue working on it. It's a whole cycle, and at some point we cut a release. So that's what I spend a significant portion of my time doing. I also work on some other things around just answering questions on the mailing list and on Twitter, and helping out with additional libraries and things like that.
Awesome. So now everybody listening, you guys have a little bit of the inside picture on what goes into managing Clojure. Awesome. Where do you get that? Where do you hear that kind of stuff other than on Bit Tech Talk? All right. Last question over here. Alex, thank you so much for joining us again. But I just want to put this one out there for the parents. I'm a parent, and I know we have several parents who listen to our show. And I'm just wondering, as a father, raising your kids, what are you doing to, develop them to be, comfortable in science and technology and just kind of supporting their growth in that area?
Probably more stuff than we could talk about. But, for me, the number one thing is curiosity. And, when kids ask a question, to try to answer it in a way that encourages them to learn more about the world around them. And I can't imagine that ever leading any place that's a bad thing, So sometimes I'll encourage them to go learn more about it. Sometimes I will tell them a little bit, or, we will watch, programs together on TV or go do an experiment or something like that. And I'm not any super dad. I'm not out doing science experiments every day with my kids or anything like that. But I try to encourage them to, have a curiosity about what will happen and explore and be interested in the world. And in terms of actual programming itself, I have taught classes for kids, and I've experimented with a bunch of different stuff. I mentioned I have a daughter. I also have two sons, and what I found is them and other kids is they all react differently. So they will latch on to different things, and so I think it's really important to expose them to a bunch of different stuff, and something will stick. Something will catch their eye. And so if you expose them to something like, say, you show them Scratch, which is a programming language, it's a visual programming language. That's a great thing. Some kids love it. And some kids just are totally uninterested in it. So I've had some good luck for some kids with that. I've had good luck with the Khan Academy JavaScript classes are actually use the processing framework. And I've used processing independently, which is sort of a derivative of Java, but it lets you do graphics and animation. So like some of the things that I've had that I think are really important are if you're really serious about, if they're really interested in programming, I think text-based programming is really important. Like instead of just dragging things around on the screen, any programming language that you use is, and I've not seen a visual programming language that is anywhere close to as expressive as what you get in a text programming language. Language is one of the most beautiful things that humans have ever invented. People talk about this idea all the time, and I personally think that you're crazy if you think that you're going to get to a point where that I don't see how you can get to a point where text is not a language, is not an intrinsic part of sort of solving problems. So I think that's important. I think that immediate feedback is important. The thing that gets kids hooked on programming is typing something and seeing something, and then typing something and seeing something. And if you get that tight feedback loop to the point where they're literally seeing it live, like it just, you hook them into that cycle and that feedback reward cycle, and they will keep working on that for a long, long time. It'll maintain interest to the point where they can really solve problems. So I think that's really important. And I wanted to mention one thing, like earlier we said we were talking about creating your own language. One thing that I saw, there's a great site, which I can't remember now, but I'll send it to you and you can send it out. But it's all offline computer science ideas that you can do with kids, and it's like something unplugged or something like that. And one idea I got from that was the idea of programming me as a robot. So you give your kid, you let them define instructions for you, like left foot forward, right foot forward, whatever, and then they can give you a program and you'll execute it for them. And I found that was a huge amount of fun.
Good idea.
And the first thing my son did, of course, was to give me 4 left foot forward commands, which I then fell down. So, so he programmed a crash. The very first program.
There we go.
Exactly.
Did he log that bug?
Yeah, he did. I logged the bug because I was crashed. So that's a great that kind of stuff is golden, and you can do that when you're with a 4 or 5 year old, and have a lot of fun with it. So
I love it. Great, thank you, Al.
It's csunplugged.org is the website. I was talking about.
csunplug.org. Got it. We'll definitely put that in the show notes. All right, and with that, that's actually our last question that we have for you, Alex. We definitely want to thank you for joining us here tonight on the podcast. Before we go ahead, and if you have any, tell us. Well, first, give us a little bit of when StrangeLoop conference is, how people can, when tickets go on sale, things like that.
Yeah, so I just announced this a few hours ago, but we were going to open ticket sales tomorrow, but but I'm still working out a lot of details. So the tickets are going to go on sale this Friday, May 30th at noon.
Okay.
And info will be available on the StrangeLoop website, which is thestrangeloop.com. And I wanted to also mention that we will have information about the scholarship program I mentioned. Some information should be up by then.
Okay.
If probably the application form, and then we are also going to have sort of a guide mentor program that people can sign up for as well, and that probably will hit a little bit later.
Excellent.
And then, the conference itself is September 17th through 19th in St. Louis, and the first day is a pre-conference day, and then there's 2 main conference days, and there's a bunch of other stuff involved in that. There's a party and fun sessions in the evening, and there's a Cardinals ball game one night, and a bunch of different stuff. So
nice. Well, I think Ayori. Are you going to be there, Ayori?
Heck yeah, I'm going to be there.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll definitely be there as well. How can people follow you if they want to follow you on Twitter?
Oh, I'm Pure Danger on Twitter and most other places. So tech.puredanger.com is my blog.
Excellent.
You can find all the other important things from there, probably. Excellent.
Well, again, Alex, thanks a lot for joining us tonight, and look forward to more collaboration with StrangeLoop Conference in the future. So anybody who's interested in StrangeLoop, the StrangeLoop Conference, go to thestrangeloop.com, check it out. Definitely try to attend that conference. It's going to be a great conference.
Yeah,
Anything
it'll be
else,
fun.
Ayori?
No, man. Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and thanks again, Alex. It was great. I think this is just a riveting conversation, and I'm sure it's going to spark a lot of questions in people's heads. So thank you.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Blacks in Technology.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology.